小喽啰，YumongX 小鱼们，小喽啰，小喽啰。Hello, this is YumongX. I'm making this video on April the 10th, 2022. In this video, I want to talk about the leadership problem in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. But first, I would like to tell a story about what is true love. There is a nation story in China about two women fighting over motherhood of a child. In order to find out who is the one who really loves the child, the judge said to the two women, "Since both of you claim to be the real mother of the child, I say that we cut the child in halves so each of you can have half of the child." One woman immediately said, "No, don't cut the child. I am willing to give up my right just to save the child's life." Then the judge ruled to give the child to the woman who was willing to sacrifice her own interests to save the life of the child. Now, let's get back to the Russian-Ukraine conflict. In spite of all the crocodile tears from the US and NATO countries, what was everyone doing? They are sending weapons to Ukraine instead of persuading Ukraine to engage in sincere peace talks with Russia. This is adding fuel to the fire. Was anyone willing to give up NATO eastward expansion for the lives and the well-being of Ukrainians? No. They only think of the money and power they could derive from keeping Ukraine on their side. Now, Stoltenberg, the chief of NATO, is stirring up fascist forces in Japan and South Korea against China because China refused to go along with the US and NATO against Russia. Isn't it fascism to deprive China of the right of independent decision-making, especially when Stoltenberg played a despicable role to trigger the Russian-Ukrainian war? All he had to do was not to encourage Ukraine to join NATO and or not to treat Russia with hostility. But he chose NATO's continuous hostility and military build-up around Russia over the lives and well-being of the Ukrainian people. Is China behaving differently when it comes to warring countries to deserve Stoltenberg's hostility? No. When NATO bombed the Chinese embassy in Serbia in the 1990s, did China sanction US or NATO countries? No. When US invaded Iraq with false pretense, did China sanction US? No. When US invaded Afghanistan with lame excuses, did China sanction US? No. When US was found to have used torture at Guantanamo Bay, did China sanction US? No. The list goes on and on. On the other hand, did any country or UN ever sanction US every time US launched a war or killed millions of civilians? No. So, what is so strange about China not sanctioning Russia? In Stoltenberg's head, it was perfectly okay when China didn't sanction his side, but it is not okay when China doesn't sanction the side he opposes. To put it simply, if China displeases him, he has a reason to use military forces to threaten China, just like he and his buddy Biden did to Russia via NATO. Western mainstream media refuses to report it, but the truth is that the main cause for the Ukraine war was Stoltenberg's reckless decision of continuously expanding NATO to Ukraine right to the border of Russia. Many experts, including William Burns, warned about not crossing the red line to let Ukraine into NATO. William Burns is a former U.S. ambassador to Russia and the current CIA director. Look at this guy Stoltenberg, fellow humans. Look at him carefully. He is as crazy and dictatorial as any dictator you can imagine. Yet, so many Westerners are so willingly giving this guy the power to head a lethal military organization. NATO is the biggest ever in the history of the world. I mean the biggest military organization. US is the leading member of NATO and has over 800 million military bases all over the world. US has the Monroe Doctrine on the American continent. US also has tight control over its own neighbors, plus its own 800 plus military bases. Yet, US has so much trouble understanding the security need of the Russian Federation. The question the whole world needs to ask is, where are the checks and balances to counterbalance a lethal force such as the US-led NATO? None. This is very dangerous. The crocodile tears Stoltenberg shows using Ukrainian suffering as a prompt is plainly manipulative and self-serving. This is the situation we are in, my fellow human beings. So wake up and stop this guy and his equally crazy buddies from wasting precious resources to divide and destabilize the world. This guy will lead the world to crazy land. So drop him and his buddies Biden, Pelosi, von der Leyen, Boris Johnson, etc. Thank you for watching. And I hope everybody would just think about the situation carefully and take action. YumongX 小鱼们，小YumongX 小鱼们，小 下